Hello and welcome or welcome back to my channel. November will be Nonfiction November in the BookTube community, an event started by Olive at a Book Olive to encourage readers to focus more on nonfiction. Now, throughout the years of my life, I have not been much of a reader at all, but when I have read, my preference has been for nonfiction. That said, the nonfiction that I read has always been within something of a narrow focus, history and history adjacent topics. So I'm trying to branch out from that. Since the year 2022, I've been trying to read more books, more hours, more everything. And one thing that I am learning is that when you do read more, you can take more risks, if you will. When you only read 2 books a year or what have you, you'd better make sure that they are the right books to read. So I've been reading more books. I went through a phase earlier in this year where I wound up devoting 2 months to nonfiction, focusing on 2 works only, The History of the Crusades by Stephen Runciman and The Gulag Archipelago by Alexander Solzhenitsyn. Now, both of those came in 3-volume editions. So it was a bigger undertaking than just to say 2 works. But because of that, I decided to devote the next 2 months to fiction entirely, and I did. That period has just come to an end, and I've read quite a good number of novels and short story collections. And so I am ready to move back into nonfiction. I'm actually eager to do so. I've read quite a number of fictional works, partly because Shorty September came about and I was able to squeeze in for me, a high volume or a high number of books. So for me, Nonfiction November is going to begin early. It has indeed already begun. I'm not sure what the date is that I'm making this, October 19th or 20th, perhaps. And so I'm going to show you briefly my pile of possibilities, and I'll start with the one that I have started already, which is The Silk Roads, which I heard about on Heidi's channel, which is known as My Reading Life. And the Silk Roads was a topic that has been in my mind. Actually, earlier in this year, I finished Gibbon's Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire, and an awful lot of that book is devoted to areas through which the Silk Road ran. The latter part of the book particularly detailing the rise of Islam. And so I have become gradually aware that I need to learn more about that location. And earlier in the year, I was in a store and came across this and decided, I looked at it, it's a picture book, but I picked it up and was hoping to read it sometime in the near future. I checked out the writing of Francis Wood, and it looks like it's pretty well written. But then on Heidi's channel, she had recently read this and spoke very highly of it, and I am very aware of the virtues of reading current scholarship on subjects as opposed to something that is 30 years old or what have you. Now, that's not to say I won't go to this if I like this, but I read the introduction today, and so far it looks pretty good. Now, I'll just read you a little bit. By the time I was a teenager, I had become uneasy about the relentlessly narrow geographic focus of my classes at school, which concentrated solely on Western Europe and the United States and left most of the rest of the world untouched. We had been taught about the Romans in Britain, the Norman conquest of 1066, Henry VIII and the Tudors, the American War of Independence, Victorian industrialization, the Battle of the Somme, and the rise and fall of Nazi Germany. I would look up at my map and see huge regions of the world that had been passed over in silence. My education consisted of a little bit less than that. We got the United States. I, by chance, got a little bit of the conquistadores in South America, and then we got World War II. And we got the American Revolution, the Civil War, carefully excluding mention of slavery. And then we got, World War II. I don't think we even touched on World War I, except possibly the founding of the League of Nations. So my outlook was even more restricted than his. Now, some years back, I happened to read Life and Fate by Vasily Grossman, a novel set in World War II Russia, and you begin to realize that the American-centric perspective on World War II really does not tell the full story. And so this book is something of an extension of that, trying to branch out from what many of us were taught in school. Let me see the next paragraph that I thought was pretty good. By my 14th birthday, my parents gave me a book by the anthropologist Eric Wolfe, which really lit the tinder. The accepted and lazy history of civilization, wrote Wolfe, is one where ancient Greece begat Rome, Rome begat Christian Europe begat the Renaissance the Enlightenment political democracy, and the Industrial Revolution. Industry crossed with democracy, in turn yielded the United States, embodying the rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I immediately recognized that this was exactly the story that I had been told, the mantra of the political, cultural, and moral triumph of the West. But this account was flawed. There were alternative ways of looking at history, ones that did not involve looking at the past from the perspective of the winners of recent history. So this is probably right up my alley. Probably anybody who has been reading history in the last 20 years or so is well aware that currents of thought are moving in that direction. Regardless, our very narrow view, in which sort of almost in a teleological perspective, everything was leading up to the creation of the US of A, is being discarded. So it's always good to get a overview on world history, and it is subtitled A New History of the World. And so I really look forward to it. It's a bit of a chunker, being just slightly over 500 pages, but I'm looking forward to it. I hope it lives up to the good impressions that the introduction have given me, or the introduction has given me. Pardon my language. I try to talk and keep the cat from upturning the camera, but I thought I would show you a few other books that recently I was in a situation where I just had to get some books, and I picked out two, and then my partner picked out two. And these are books that I would not read, but now that I am reading more, I can take that risk and perhaps pull out one or another of these for my nonfiction November experience. They are all within the field, I suppose, of what you would call natural science. So let me show you. I may well have heard about some of these on Heidi's channel, And if not, they are the sort of thing that I would have heard about on her channel. I was going to say possibly also Britta Bohler's channel, but I think that none of these are written by women, so it could not have been there. But this is one about octopuses, and there seem to be so many books about octopuses going around. So I thought, well, I should probably learn about these intelligent creatures with the multiple brains. So that's definitely a possibility. Entangled Life, which Merlin Sheldrake, this may well be a book that I've heard about on Heidi's channel as well. I don't take notes about these things, but it sounds very interesting to me. The more we learn about fungi, the less makes sense without them. They can change our minds, heal our bodies, and even help us avoid environmental disaster. They are metabolic masters, earth makers, and key players in most of nature's processes. In Entangled Life, Merlin Sheldrake takes us on a mind-altering journey into their spectacular world and reveals how these extraordinary organisms transform our understanding of our planet and life itself. So, I mean, in a way, it might be a good follow-up to this. Then, my partner picked up The Silent Earth, Averting the Insect Apocalypse. The realm of action is not my forte these days. I'm somewhat hopeless about averting anything. Not that I think everything has been predetermined, but still, possibly understanding what's going on with this massive die-off of insects is worth looking at. It might be very depressing as well. And then the next one is one called A Very Short History of Life on Earth. So I don't know what the story is on any of these books. These two will be my first choices. I hope, given that this book is 500 pages, it's hard to say that I will even make it to a second book during Nonfiction November, even with my early start, but I am hopeful. As I say, this last couple of months have really pushed me ahead with the fictional works, and I'm hoping that some of that momentum can continue on. So stay tuned, and I will report on my progress. Thank you very much for stopping by my channel.